And hello and welcome to the March Anglo-Irish Astro Geeks. Now, unfortunately, Anne and Neil can't be with us this month. Neil's on furlough from the show, and Anne will be back next month. So yes, here we are in glorious Technicolor. It's a Zoom show this month, and to be honest, I think from now on it's really going to be a Zoom show every month, because at the end of the day, it's much more fun when you can see the guests and you can see the expressions on our faces, even when we're trying not to laugh. So yeah, okay.
Whenever we're fanboying and fangirling over our heroes that we get to talk to, which is amazing.
Yeah. So
and also me constantly trying to get my background straight. It's never going to happen ever. So
that's why
if you do it so often, I'm delighted. Yeah.
I tried
on my background. So
yeah. Trust me. You don't want to see my background because I'm in my student area, and well, it's a student area. But the green screen thing didn't work for me. It's going back. So it is what it is. Okay. So anyway, without further ado, let's have the sky notes for March, which I'm doing for a change. Woohoo! Apart from the ISS and Moon, this month's planetary sightings there for early risers. You can still see plenty of stars, asterisms, and constellations, such as Orion, which is heading west this month. Also, keep an eye out for aurora alerts. They are happening. The sun is beginning to ramp up for the current solar cycle. There has been a ton of DX. Yes, as you can see, I've got an amateur radio course on. So yes, the sun is ramping up a lot. We've had some really good aurorae, thanks to some stonking good CMEs that have come our way. A couple of them were even better, but they went in the other direction, so we can't have it all. Okay, Mars is very dim at the moment. We're going to have to wait until the end of the year for it to be closest again. Jupiter is hiding near the sun, whilst Saturn is just coming out of a similar conjunction and will appear in morning skies towards the end of the month. So for the 13th of March, tomorrow, that's Sunday, sorry, a chance to see the twins Castor and Pollux above the moon as they set in the west at 4 a.m, but they should be visible during Saturday night too. And on Wednesday the 16th, Venus will be about 3.9 degrees above Mars at dawn. Should be a lovely sight with Mars very low in the sky. Moving on to Friday. Friday will be full moon. Most astronomers hate it. I don't know why. Because this is a perfect time to start learning your way around the moon, starting with the Mare and some of the larger craters. Tycho, Copernicus bring to mind. So it's a good time, really. Get to know your local moon. It's called the worm moon, also called crow comes back moon, eagle moon, goose moon, wind strong moon, and I am told sore eye moon. I think that's a pun in there somewhere.
Yeah, and poor Anne and her moon, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Also on Friday, the International Space Station will be visible in evening skies again until April the 3rd. So if you're a red amateur and you're listening to this, it's maybe a good time to get out the handheld antenna, get your handy talkie out, switch onto 2 meters, and see if you can pick up the ISS repeater. Obviously, if you're doing radio passes, it could be a lot closer to the horizon than it would be than optical observers really want. But that's just by the side. Sunday, March the 20th, it's March equinox. It's spring in Ireland and the UK. When the light and dark are of equal lengths, the sun will be over the equator and be continuing to move up from the topic of Capricorn to the topic of Cancer until summer solstice in June. And which brings us to the 25th. The moon phase will be in the last quarter. It's a good opportunity to see the craters. On Wednesday, the 23rd, jumping about a bit. I blame the editor. Sorry about that. March 23rd, Antares will be just 4.5 degrees from a 73% moon at 5 a.m. in the south. Now we're back to the 27th. Mars will be 13 degrees from 28% moon at 6 a.m. And Venus will be above Saturn very low in the southeast at dawn and even closer next morning. So it's now Monday the 25th. Mars and Venus will be close together and close to a waning crescent moon at dawn. with Venus 100 times brighter than Mars. They will be close for about a week on either side of St. Patrick's Day. You can't miss Venus. It's the brightest thing in the sky at the moment. And no, it's not a UFO. Which brings us to 23 March the 29th. Venus is just 2.1 degrees from Saturn at about 5:30 a.m. You will need binoculars for Saturn as it's very dim at the moment. And that's about it, the sky notes.
Thank you so much, Nick. And back to the 28th of March, when they say Venus will be so bright in the sky. Everybody in Ireland will see it all the time because we won't need binoculars. Everybody will just be drunk.
yeah. It's okay. I've been to Ireland on St. Paddy's Day. Yeah, I know the routine. Anyway, moving on. Next, it's time for our guest. And we have spared no expense here at Anglo-Irish Astro Geeks, and we have a cracking great guest. Oh boy, I tell you, I have not been drinking. Seriously, I have not been drinking. So anyway, and now over to our guest. And now we have to go to our special guest, Dr. Kelly Fast.
Thank you for having me.
It's great. In fact, we've talked over quite a number of years, off and on. But anyway, this is all to do with planetary defense this month. Now, I know that you grew up in California and that you had the Griffith Observatory as something you would see from your home on a regular basis.
That's right. Doesn't everybody have that kind of a view out their window? It was sort of an unusual upbringing to be up in the Hollywood Hills like that and see the city and see the Hollywood sign. But I was a nerd in Hollywood. And so really my passion was for astronomy. So I always say I went with the observatory view.
Now,
I have the little pin badge of the Griffith Observatory. So a friend of mine in California sent it to me. So I just thought, let's bring that on tonight.
Oh, it's fabulous. It's such an amazing icon of LA, but just such a wonderful, inspiring place for astronomy. And it's iconic.
How did that inspire you, Kelly? You know, when you had that view from your window at that observatory, you know, at a young age growing up, a telescope in your room, observing the night sky, you know, did you ever kind of fathom, imagine then as a child where you could end up?
I don't think I really did. I just loved astronomy. I loved Star Trek and Space 1999, and I could see an observatory out my window, and I just thought it would be neat to be an astronomer, and which is kind of funny in Los Angeles where there's so much light pollution, but you could see the planets, you know, even in the city, you could see the planets, and that's what really inspired me. But I don't think I really knew what it meant, you know, to be a scientist or research astronomer, you know, until I started going down that path to school and then working at Goddard Space Flight Center and getting the opportunity to go to observatories. But back then it was just kind of this amazing thing, especially also being a young woman in the 80s growing up. I mean, I didn't really have any other friends who were into this sort of thing. So it was sort of my own private little obsession and an unusual thing, I guess, at the time.
Do you ever remember young, you know, seeing your first shooting star, you know, a meteor, and thinking, I want to know more about this? Because I know here in this house, we with a young son involved in planetary defense. Whenever you see the first time, just the inspiration and the imagination that it captured, what was it like for you whenever you first seen that in the sky? Your first, you know,
I don't know. Well, it's interesting because I don't know that I could remember my first shooting star or even early ones, again, being in kind of a light polluted area. I didn't go out like looking at I tried looking meteor showers and I remember seeing shooting stars occasionally. And I don't think the implications really hit me. And even later on, when I did my first, you know, observing run as a professional astronomer for which happened to be for the Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 impacts with Jupiter. And that's something that really in the history of planetary defense was, you know, one of the big exclamation points, the wake-up calls. Even back then, though, I was studying it for what it would do to Jupiter. It was just kind of a cool way to perturb Jupiter's atmosphere so we could study Jupiter's atmosphere. So it's funny how all of those implications really didn't hit me until later on, as I started getting sucked into this side of the work with planetary defense, and really developed a respect for those who are out there watching for such objects, because the shooting stars are really cool. The bigger ones, not so much.
So you grew up in Hollywood. Obviously, you would have seen what we would see as terrestrial stars, the celebrities, but obviously you had the interest in more than that, the actual stars. It must have been unusual growing up having that interest, but maybe friends didn't.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think about it, and I remember the school I went to eventually had a computer club, and I don't know why I didn't get in it. I think maybe I was just a little intimidated, and because it was mostly guys in the club, and there was no reason why I shouldn't have, because I don't know that I did. I think this is a case where it was more me. You know, sometimes there were barriers to women, but sometimes, you know what, we got to take it upon ourselves, and I don't think that I really took it upon myself. But people thought it was kind of cute, like, oh, there's Kelly, she's into Star Trek, and and that was all fine with me. We did have a small astronomy club, but I just, not really having like close friends who were passionate about this. I didn't really feel like I had teachers and other students who could talk to about this. But I guess it really wasn't until I went to college, when I went to UCLA, and actually being in the major and being, with classmates who were, that was their objective, astronomy, then there was you felt like there was more support for that. But you're right, being in the LA area, it's stars. It was I knew some actors, I tutored some actors' kids, I did that kind of thing. But it's funny how you still kind of have, I don't know, we all have our personalities and we all have our interests, and even but we still get influenced by our surroundings. And it's funny, I joke, because my dad's an engineer, my mom was a professional dancer. You put the two of those together, you get a scientist, apparently. But there's some of that Hollywood influence though there. Yeah. And I don't know if that's from growing up there or what, but there's still kind of a passion for visualizing things and being creative. And so there's that aspect too, and I think we tend to pigeonhole each other, where it's just, okay, this is what you do this one thing. No, we all have a lot of breadth to our experience, and we can bring that into our science, or into our arts, or into whatever it is that we're doing,
into everything,
right, as you're doing with this podcast.
There's so much talent, people we've talked to in the space industry, the other interests are into music and the arts, and, how it all mixes in, and it just makes everybody has something to give, which is quite incredible. It makes everybody interesting, unique, very unique in their own way, as well as doing amazing work.
Absolutely. It makes for a richer experience. I mean, we all, especially I think with this pandemic era, we've had difficulties separating our work lives and our home lives. So that's a whole other issue, trying to protect personal time and all that. But there's no reason why you can't bring your breadth of experience into your job, and vice versa, just within reason. So you have some downtime too.
But Kelly, you've quite a really interesting career, where you've started, where you are now. But you were a research astronomer for the Goddard Space Flight Center, where you developed high resolution infrared for, the missions. So how does that intersect now with where we are, the development, looking for asteroids and comets? The infrared, how much of a difference now is that going to make? And searching for the unknown. We know the known out there on risks lists, but for the unknown, how is the infrared now going to really progress?
Right. Well, certainly where I've ended up isn't a path that I planned. And I think it's just a reminder to all of us that you kind of have to be open to opportunities along the way and to not be too, it's good to set a goal, but not be too frustrated if that path kind of meanders, because it could be a really good thing. Because, as you said, I was doing research astronomy at Goddard Space Flight Center. I was working with a group there that used infrared instrumentation out in Hawaii at NASA's Infrared Telescope Facility, looking at the atmospheres of planets and with infrared spectroscopy and studying the properties of atmospheres in a really unique way. And so what in the world does that have to do with asteroids? Well, along the way, I eventually I was involved with the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 impact. So there was that kind of little data point. But then later on, I was asked to go to NASA headquarters to manage some programs, some funding programs and mission activities, just on detail for a few years, and then ended up turning permanent. I ended up never going back to research, but that's fine. I can kind of enable the research. But I ended up managing research portfolios involving astronomy and in planetary science. We go to our targets. We send spacecraft to our targets generally. So there are astronomers for planetary scientists, but not all planetary scientists are astronomers using telescopes, looking at things remotely. Though you need that to lay the groundwork before you're going to go throw a spacecraft at something. So it was kind of neat because I felt like I brought something unique to that, and I was managing astronomy portfolios. And then the telescope that I was using as a researcher, I ended up managing as the contract management and as the program scientist, and then working with the director out at the observatory. And so, so I brought all that experience in, which kind of helped on the programmatic side down at NASA headquarters. And I worked closely with Lindley Johnson, who is now our planetary defense officer, because he was managing the near-Earth object observations portfolio. So essentially I had the rest of the solar system and he had the near-Earth asteroids. And then somehow one morning I woke up and I was managing that portfolio. It happened a little more gradually. I'd been doing other things, like I was the program scientist for the MAVEN mission at Mars, and I managed planetary atmospheres research. But eventually I had to let those things go. I moved over to near-Earth objects and planetary defense. And it's not something that I did as a researcher, but I knew spectroscopy, I knew astronomy, but I had a lot to learn. And over the years, I've really, really come to appreciate and respect all the different projects that NASA supports for planetary defense, the wide field surveys, looking at the sky, looking for those moving objects to try to find asteroids and get them cataloged and calculate their orbits, figure out where they're going to be in the future, studying physical properties of asteroids, like using spectroscopy, other research activities, the International Astronomical Union's Minor Planet Center is something that we fund. The Center for Near-Earth Object Studies at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So just all of those things, it's been amazing to kind of be a part of managing that portfolio and running interference for them, supporting them, doing what needs to be done, kind of on the programmatic bureaucratic side, competing the funding so we can have the best capabilities at NASA. So it's been kind of this long path that it sort of gradually happened, but now that I'm here, I can look back and see these spots along the way that really contributed, like actually being out and using the IRTF and doing research astronomy. And so now I don't get to go to the telescope at night anymore, but I get to support those who do.
Yeah. See, every couple of years as well, Kelly, I love the way you do the Planetary Defense Conference, where you have like a hypothetical impact that's going to happen. And it's incredible the way the teams work together, how they're going to mitigate, figuring what time they have, how big this is, where it's going to hit, the catastrophe, the damage that it could do. How do you come up with these scenarios? And whatever you see in the media, it's like it's not real. It's not real. So not to put the panic out there, but how do you come up with with that, and it's fantastic because we follow it every time you do the conferences. It's incredible.
Right, there's the planetary defense community is fantastic, and there are some key players in that are so important for that. I can think of like Paul Chodas of the Center for Near Earth Object Studies at JPL, and he's sort of the mastermind of sort of the fundamentals of these scenarios. Just the idea of coming up with a realistic object with a real, it's a hypothetical object, but with a realistic orbit and a realistic discovery situation where not just throwing something together that could be in a Hollywood script, trying to really put the idea that it's on a beeline for us. It's like, no, the Earth is going around the sun, the asteroids are going around the sun, and sometimes you see them and sometimes you can't because they're on the other side of the sun. But every so often it might be that the Earth and the asteroid could be in the same place at the same time. And can you catch that potential when you see it, maybe a few orbits beforehand, and which would be the ideal thing to find out years or decades in advance. So the idea of doing these exercises and coming up with these realistic scenarios, and then folding in the rest of the community, like there's the asteroid threat assessment project at NASA Ames that we support, that takes that situation, and in the event of an impact, they calculate what might happen to the asteroid as it enters the atmosphere, what the impact effects might be. Does it reach the ground intact? Does the atmosphere disrupt it on the way in? What would be the effects? And then there are other members of the community who would look at the observability of the object, and what could you learn about the object, its physical properties. If you were to do a deflection mission, what could you learn ahead of time to help you design that deflection mission, and what might that deflection mission might be? And then just kind of the real world situation where, again, in the movies, it's really easy to say, we've got something on the pad ready to go. I mean, now it takes years. It takes years to develop a mission and get it in the queue and everything. And it's not a simple thing. And so, and plus, again, we're going around the sun, the asteroids are going around the sun. It has to be the right circumstances to go lob a spacecraft at an asteroid. So there are many pieces to it. And so the fantastic part of the Planetary Defense Conference is a chance for all the members of the planetary defense community around the world to kind of come together and look at those different pieces and brainstorm about it. And just so that, if we ever do face this, then it's not the first time that we've ever thought about it. So it's a good mind game, a good exercise, but hopefully we never, need to do this for real.
Yeah,
your career itself sounds like it actually came from left field, and it went in an unusual path that you didn't think you were going to get there, like an asteroid. You probably couldn't have mapped it out yourself. So I mean, I'd say your career path has also helped you with your now work. Oh,
absolutely. Again, it's not something that I did map out for myself, and people they could decide, I want to go into planetary defense. There are a bunch of different aspects of it. I did not, but I recognized the many people along the way who kind of encouraged me along, at different levels, not necessarily to planetary defense, but just who kind of kept pushing me along. When I first went to grad school, I was planning to go through for a Ph.D. and I ended up stopping at a master's because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and just was kind of stagnant. And I was married. I started having babies. I was working for Goddard and kind of realized, that's what I loved, the planets. And I was pioneering telework back before telework was a thing, and raising kids. And then they pushed me to go back to grad school, and I was like, over my dead body. But then I didn't say that. I was thinking that.
I tell you what, I know what it's like. I'm back as an undergrad myself, starting in October. Yes, I'm doing planetary science. Isn't it terribly predictable?
That's fabulous. And here's the thing, because I was scared at the thought of going back to grad school, but then with 2 kids and dirty dishes in the sink, here I was back in grad school. But I found, first of all, I credit the people around me who thought I had the potential, because I didn't think so at the time. And I didn't think I could handle it with kids, but I did. But you also, I mean, I've learned that there's really no one right path, and these so-called alternative career paths, I think all of them are great. And for some, going straight through is the thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But boy, I found for me, going back to school later after having worked in the field, I approached it with a maturity that I didn't have before, and more of a vision of what I might want to do, even though, again, I didn't anticipate being where I am right now. But there's something to be said for that. And so I think that's great, going back to school now, because you're probably at a stage in your life where you've got the life experience where you have more of a vision. When I first went into grad school, I still had no idea, what it meant professionally or anything, or even life. I mean,
you're a much better student as an adult. We only realize that as we get older. We don't appreciate our teachings when we're young. When we get older, sitting in a classroom or learning from anyone is a pleasure.
Right. I agree. And so, because then, especially because like when we go back to school, when we're a little older, it's because we really want to, and it's something we're passionate about. And you're right, we are, we're a little more mature about it. We're a little more skilled at it. So, I was worried that, oh my goodness, I'm kind of at a disadvantage. I've got 2 kids at home and I've got to compete with these other students. And I realized, they're goofing off and doing stuff because they're younger. It's like, that kind of levels the playing field.
Yeah. But it's great now, the opportunities, especially for kids, with the whole STEM and the STEAM, which is something we really campaign for. Well, I have a kid with special needs, so we kind of are in that area, inclusion for all. But I remember, going to school, you didn't have the support then, and it was nearly like, why are you interested in that? Why do you want to do that? Especially over here in Ireland, I find. And then teachers really put me off. And as you say, it's only now in my 40s that I'm finding my life that I should have been doing years ago. But I'm actually, I think now I'm more passionate about it, because you have a totally different mindset and you don't let anybody put you off, or, it's just
there's no peer pressure, and there's a lot more respect from you as a student towards the learning, the teaching, the listening.
And there's certainly a certain confidence and boldness that comes with age, where you kind of just realize, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to do what I want to do. But yes, it is harder when we're younger, especially if we don't have people to support us. And I was just really blessed along the way to have some people kind of pushing me along even though I had these passions, I didn't have the boldness. And so they kind of gave me a kick when I needed the boldness. And now I kind of feel the boldness to encourage other people. So I guess that's how you keep passing it along, paying it forward.
Yeah.
With the advent finally of a new Southern Skies program similar to Pan-STARRS, and the Catalina Sky Survey, do you see this really opening up planetary defense on a whole new level?
Well, it certainly helps. Did you say, what did you say about the Southern Skies? I'm sorry.
Because for a long time, a lot of the All Sky survey work that was being done in Australia was by Rob McNaught, and then the funding ended for it. So nobody in the Southern Hemisphere really was doing the same type of work as Pan-STARRS does and Catalina does here in the Northern Hemisphere. So with the return to an all-sky survey in the Southern Hemisphere, is that going to make the job of planetary defense planning much easier?
Right. Well, it certainly helps to have that extra coverage. Just earlier this year, the Atlas telescopes, which is another project out of University of Hawaii. There's 2 telescopes, smaller robotic telescopes that are in Hawaii. That project, they collaborated with groups in Chile and South Africa. And so they have deployed telescopes in those countries, which provide some important southern sky coverage. And we're also collaborating with the Space Surveillance Telescope in Australia, which is that telescope used to be located in New Mexico, and was now a collaboration between the U.S. Space Force and Australia. and in our case, getting the natural objects out of the data that they're not interested in. And so as we work out that sort of collaboration, we hope to be working with data from that telescope too. So the southern sky coverage will help a lot to kind of cover some areas that aren't. And then there's upcoming projects. There's the Vera Rubin Observatory, which is under construction. And then NASA is working on the Near Earth Object Surveyor Space Telescope, which is an infrared telescope that would be located at the Sun-Earth Lagrange 1 point. So that point on the sunward side of the Earth, where there was a lot in the news about the James Webb Space Telescope because it was going to the Sun-Earth Lagrange 2 point, on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun. And so this one would go on the sunward side of the Earth, surveying along Earth's orbit, both directions. Getting closer to the direction of the sun than can be done with the ground-based telescopes, really targeting where the most hazardous asteroids could be. And then also looking in the infrared, being able to find objects regardless of their surface coloring. If there's some really dark albedo, dark colored asteroids, they would look a lot fainter in the visible and might be tougher to pick up and tougher to infer their sizes. And so this capability with the NEO Surveyor will be important. It's something that all the ground-based telescopes and the improvements that are coming along the way will accelerate discovering the near-Earth objects that are still out there that we believe are still remain to be found. But multiple studies, including the most recent one with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in the US, that just keep pointing to the need for both ground and space-based capability. If we're going to get to that point where we can say, like in the case in the US, NASA's tasking of finding 90% of the near-Earth asteroids that are 140 meters in size or larger. We're beyond that with these much larger asteroids, a kilometer and larger, the ones that could really have global consequences. And then really small asteroids, again, we were talking about the shooting stars, our atmosphere does a good job. We can just see a pretty fireball, but there are these ones in between that could reach Earth's surface and that could cause regional damage. And so so all that's to say the added capability in the southern hemisphere is going to be very valuable. And then in concert with the northern surveys and with the Near Earth Object Surveyor mission, when that launches, that will hopefully start us down the path to speeding up the survey and getting us to that 90% completion.
Good.
Just coming up to this month, Kelly, the 27th of March, if I'm right, whenever Neowise was discovered, whenever we first went into that lockdown phase with the pandemic, how did that impact? How did you feel that impact? Because it's something everybody locked at home, couldn't go anywhere, but we got to see this comet in the skies. With the planetary defense and trying to educate what's out there. But, do you feel that made a big impact, that people actually got to see that with their own eyes? It was a beautiful sight when we got to actually see it, I think twice with the clouds here in Ireland, but it was a beautiful sight. And it was very, everybody was struggling with lockdown, but just to look out and know that you were kind of connected with everybody, space connects us, that everybody was getting to see this.
Oh, exactly. And I'm so glad that you got to see it there too. And the clouds cleared so you could see it. In fact, the room I'm in right now, I'm looking, it's the window that I climbed out onto the roof so I could see it in the morning sky. And then later, I was able to see it in the evening sky when I was out of town. It was one of those things where, comets are always the harbingers of doom, but it seems like it was something we really needed. We needed just a neat astronomical phenomenon, because yes, we were all kind of isolated from each other. The lockdown was just starting, and it was just really nice to just have something that we could all share. We couldn't be together, but we could all look at this comet. And it's also one of the neat things that come out of like planetary defense operations, surveying the skies and looking for hazardous asteroids. You also find cool science targets too, and some of them end up being cool naked eye targets. So that was valuable too. But that was a really neat event. And NEOWISE, the space telescope, it was a repurposed astrophysics mission, but it's been able to be used to continue its mission to find and really more characterize asteroids and comets. And it's been a fantastic pathfinder for the NEO Surveyor mission to do it in a targeted way. But that was a fun time having Comet NEOWISE, and I think we needed it.
I'm sure the excitement as well, for the teams, whenever, what's this? When you're looking for something completely different, and then by surprise, ta-da, here we go. It must be so exciting for everyone all around, in those departments working, to find a new thing. Yeah, they're in it for discovery, and sometimes it can be kind of routine, like, oh, yep, here we go, another 5-meter asteroid. but we want to know where it is and where it's going to be. But it's a lot more. It can be particularly fun when it's something that other people can share like this. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun for the team.
I remember when the Chernobylsk airburster came through, and it was interesting that we're all looking in certain areas of the skies, but the one direction we weren't looking in was the one direction that something came in that didn't disintegrate totally, but it did disintegrate finally with a sonic boom at a decent height in the atmosphere, thankfully. Just really as a wake-up call. As you said earlier, Shoemaker Levy 9, the whole world suddenly realized that we are at risk. I remember SL9. It was one of those things which I think got a lot of us starting to think about, well, if a comet can shatter and do damage the atmosphere of Jupiter like Shoemaker Levy 9 did, what's it going to do to us? And in fact, it also answered some very interesting questions about some crater chains, one of which is on Callisto, because you have a series of crater chains, one after the other in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And nobody could figure out what caused it. I believe there's actually one on the moon, and there is a similar object here on the Earth, similar chain. So no one could figure out what caused, how unreasonable would it be to have a whole series of objects coming in the same trajectory, crash landing, and impacting one after the other. In the end, Shoemaker Levy 9 gave us the answer to that. It was actually possibly a comet that got too close to Jupiter. It shattered. And then individually, the pieces slammed into Callisto to create what was going to be, for quite a while, quite an interesting puzzle for optical astronomers.
Right. That was, like you said, it was that wake-up call that impacts still happen in the solar system, and thankfully Jupiter is a lot more likely to get impacted. So, but still, that was like, you know what? Yeah, we see this crater record on the moon, and what's left of what you can see on the Earth, you can see it on Mars, and we don't have that kind of cratering now, thank goodness, at this point in the solar system. But there's still stuff floating around out there. It can still happen. And then, like you said, the cool science coming out of it, the idea of calculating orbits, figuring out that, wow, this thing passed close enough to Jupiter that Jupiter's gravity was able to disrupt it into pieces and then alter its orbit so that the next time it hit. And so being able to go and look at like the crater record on Callisto and put these crater chains together. And so it's always neat, sort of the whole kind of hopscotch of discovery, where like one discovery leads to another. And so it was, it's funny looking back at that whole experience, because for the comet people, it was comet science. For the Jupiter people, it was Jupiter atmosphere science. And then people studying crater chains, it was that kind of science. There was so much that came out of that. But on top of it, the idea that we're watching an impact happen, and thank goodness it's not us, but maybe we should think about you know,
Yeah,
finding
do you
out what
s-
else is out there.
what do you say to people that think that we shouldn't be spending any money on the space program and for protection? What do you say to people that think it's a needless spend? I think it's a very needed spend, but what would you say to people who think it's money not well spent?
Well, it seems like in the area of planetary defense, it's not something that people are clamoring to say don't spend money on it. Usually it comes out as, you know, this is a high priority thing. There might be other
Yeah.
aspects of the space program that maybe people may be for or against, but that seems to be generally an area that people support, and it's
Yeah.
not an area that, you know, requires you know, huge budgets or anything. Just enough to do it right, and hopefully get us
Yeah.
in a position where we're then in just kind of monitoring mode. You know, if we can get
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the survey under our belts, then it's more of monitoring mode, and then maybe doing some, you know, just developing some test capability like the DART mission right now. That's it's a modest mission as missions go, but it's the simple idea of let's test out an asteroid
Yeah.
deflection method, and the simplest of all, a kinetic impactor. You know, just slamming a spacecraft into an asteroid. And nature's given this interesting opportunity with the asteroid system Didymos, with a moon Dimorphos going around it. And it's going to pass where telescopes from Earth can observe. And so it gives us opportunity where by impacting that moon, the light from that system will change, indicating the change in the period of the orbit of that little asteroid around the large one. And it's a way of testing capability. So all that's to say, you know, whatever should be done at the appropriate level, but it's something we can do. So so it's something we you know, it's a gift we can give to future generations to just, you know, try to get what's needed in place, and then hopefully be in maintenance mode.
Kelly, I just love there. Whenever you talked about DART, I can just see the smile and the excitement in your face. It was DART as a big passion of ours. My son Hayden he's the Planetary Defense Ambassador for ESA's Hera mission.
Yeah.
So, you know, so we have a big involvement with it. And, you know, to see, we knew about DART from, you know, the years back, the planning. And we were kind of part of the, you know, the different programs, the phase B1 workshop, the Hera. So we were kind of part of that journey. And then to see that launch, and then, you know, the follow-up. I know late September, we're going to have the big impact. And I know some of the scientists and astronomers and the team at DART refer to it's like a vending machine. So hopefully, you know, the cans of Coke and the drinks and everything stays intact in there.
Yeah.
but you know, it's so exciting, you know, to test this out, and you know, then to follow up. You know, obviously that works. That is something then that could be put in place. But see, at the moment, with the risk list of asteroids you have known about. So for this mission being a success and the follow-up, say that, you know, they say, oh, one of these isn't going to be at risk to us anytime soon, but we don't know that. You know, in 2018, we were sitting in Luxembourg at the technical briefing for Asteroid Day, and the news came in. We were all sitting there. That this asteroid exploded, a car-sized asteroid exploded in Puerto Rico into 3 parts, but luckily it crashed into the Pacific Ocean. So it was so iconic. We were sitting for Asteroid Day, but end of, you know, that June, and that this news came in. So it just shows you, you know, how quickly it can happen, the unknown. But where are we now? You know, what do we know? How many is actually on the risk list now?
Right, and thankfully the smaller asteroids, like what you described there in 2018, at least, you know, again, our atmosphere does a good job of taking care of and disrupting the small asteroids on the way in. So that's good. Although they are kind of that exclamation point when they happen during activities like what you were involved in. I don't know the risk list number offhand, although it's all public. Both ESA and NASA at the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies at JPL, they both have their risk lists. I don't remember the numbers, but the thing is, all of the ones that are on there have impact probabilities that are very, very low, just a very, very small fraction of a percent. And so that's the good thing. And then also you hear often the media will make a big deal when there's a close approach of an asteroid that's 3 million miles away. And and it's cool. And we want to pay attention to things. And especially if asteroids pass within the distance of the moon or within the distance of the geosynchronous satellites. But again, those aren't the ones we're really worried about. It's the ones we don't know about yet. And we know there's still more because we still find them. There's people who do modeling based on what we see. They're able to kind of estimate based on the capabilities, the telescopes and all, what we aren't seeing and at the rate we're finding them, be able to make those estimates. So that's really the bigger concern rather than and it's good that we've got the risk list of things to keep an eye on. But there is nothing, that's standing out. It's the ones we don't know about.
Well, what you're doing is actually saving us maybe in the future of a huge disaster. So, I mean, but getting back to the funding, I think what you're doing is like insurance against what may happen or what possibly will happen one day in the future. So every asteroid, everything you discover, it's all just helping you along your way of learning.
Right. It's just, hopefully we really fill out the survey and then find out, what, we don't have anything on the, that kind of crosses that threshold that we need to worry about, but we don't know until we do it. So like you said, it's like insurance, it's like a gift to future generations. Yeah. And the other nice part is there is so much bonus science that comes out of it. I mean, the targets of science missions, were discovered by these all-sky surveys, surveying for small bodies. And there's so many cool small bodies missions coming up. And then, like you said, Hera after DART, and the Didymos system was discovered by the Space Watch survey. There are other missions like at NASA, Lucy and Psyche, and there's all sorts of science that comes out of these activities. So there are many benefits to it, but worth doing.
I was just going to say, sorry, Caroline, that according to the European Space Agency risk list, obviously, folks, I have not been drinking. There are 1,347 objects at the moment.
Wow.
That's from ESA.
Right. But then at least, again, none of them, have any kind of impact probability that kind of raises that up to like a level where we need to be worried. Actually, there are, and the nice thing is like ESA and the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies that NASA supports, they're kind of good checks on each other with doing those calculations for the risk list, and they work closely, which is great. But there's also worldwide collaboration. There are two bodies that were recommended by the UN. And this, so they're not UN organizations, but they were recommended collaborations. And that came about at the time that the Chelyabinsk impact happened. So again, it was another one of those, putting the exclamation point on the activity. One of them is the International Asteroid Warning Network, which is a collaboration of observatories and organizations and orbit modelers who just are putting their capabilities towards this effort. They maybe observe small bodies, send their observations to the Minor Planet Center. And then there's also the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, which is a collaboration of space agencies and space-capable nations that look at possibilities for deflection missions that could be considered. And that the threshold where they would consider kind of activating and looking at possibilities is a 1% impact probability. And again, going back to the risk list, there's nothing there that is beyond, you know, that 1% probability. If anything, you know, I think everything on there is like a couple orders of magnitude below 1%. So, but again, worth keeping an eye on, because you would want to keep an eye on any object that comes close to Earth's orbit. There are a lot of near Earth objects that come into the inner solar system that never actually come close to Earth's orbit itself. So that's good. They're just cool science targets. But the subset, the potentially hazardous asteroids, the ones that could do damage and actually come close to Earth's orbit, you'd want to keep an eye on them in case it could be a problem in the future. So, but again, we don't know of anything like for the next century. It's what we don't know about.
Yeah.
How excited for Kelly? You know, the James Webb Space Telescope. So the purpose of that mission is going back in time. So how excited and maybe nervous as well? You know, that this could show up the unknown asteroids. Of course, it'll be exciting, but you know, but to actually see, oh, right. You know, then you'll have the job then if they show up, which we hope that they do, working out, right, where are these going? What's their trajectories? You know, how excited are you for that part of it as well?
Well, the James Webb Space Telescope is, very sensitive infrared telescope, and it's just amazing how it's all come together, and we've all watched, the launch and crews and operations for, coming together, and it's just incredible how it's all working out. But because it's such a sensitive infrared telescope, it's limited in where it can point. And so if an asteroid is in the right place, then it can be used to study it. But it has a different mission. Like you said, it's looking back in time to the early universe. And so, but it's still a capability that can be utilized. There's lots of telescopes that are like NEOWISE was designed for a different purpose, but it's also being used for asteroids. So James Webb is a player. It's there are asteroid astronomers who want to use it for asteroid science. And so in the event that there is an object that's discovered that is that could pose a threat to Earth, if it's a place that the James Webb Space Telescope could point, then it could be used to maybe study its properties and to try to maybe infer something about its composition or size. But then there will be other telescopes to bring to bear on it too, since James Webb is a little limited in that sense. But it's going to be a very sensitive infrared instrument. It's so fun watching it come together, especially things as complicated as it was. And so I just know that team is just rejoicing at the victories.
Up to the launch, Christmas Day, even under my tree, the presents didn't matter. The main thing in the house, it was, let's get this launch. It was just like this big sigh of relief whenever. Yeah.
I watched it live on my phone while cooking the dinner for 11 people, and the dinner was lovely. But funnily enough, I don't really remember cooking it. I was cooking, and I had all the kids and all the grandchildren, the whole lot up. But I just was watching the launch, and I was fixated on it, obviously paying attention to not burn myself. But dinner was perfect, but the launch was amazing.
It was a wonderful Christmas gift, and same here. Yes. I was on the West Coast visiting my parents, and so in my case, I made sure to get up really early and and watch that launch. But that was fabulous. But
it was nail biting. Yeah.
Yes. And then it continued to be so during cruise and during all the unfolding. But it has been so amazing. People have put so much work into it, and it's paying off.
Fabulous. Yeah.
What I will do for the people listening, I will go on the NASA and ESA websites and pull all the links and put all them straight into the show notes, so that people can actually look at the type of thing we've been talking about. Sorry, nearly hit my microphone. But they can see some of the websites which are available for them to access and see. Because what gets me is, I have to admit, I laugh at it. People say, the World Space Agencies are hiding the terrible truth about an asteroid that's coming in to hit us. And my comment's been, you've got to be joking. There's too many amateur astronomers with professional grade instruments. we're worldwide. We can cover the whole of both hemispheres. If we saw it, we would be on to our relevant news agencies around the world.
Yeah.
It would not be a secret. In
No.
fact, my one thing about budgets and stuff, we all have these. This actually, if you think about it, is a byproduct of the Apollo space program. The chips that are in our home computers were designed for the Apollo program, for the command module and the module. So everything had to be scaled down from transistors to integrated circuits to meet the weight requirements. Basically, you can send one of these into orbit to function as an operating satellite. I think a couple of universities and colleges have done that as a practical experiment. It works. It's under the CubeSat program. So really, people say, what are we getting from it? Well, you've got this from it for a start. So there is a lots of things that come out of the space programs that you don't realize. Our CCD cameras that most of us amateur astronomers have came from the space program. Well, actually, they came from the spy satellite programs originally, but they became cheaper to build, better, more effective, and they became available to the civilian market. The astronomy community jumped on them. Well, they couldn't believe it was like all their Christmases and birthdays in one go. We actually have a camera that we can put on our telescopes that can look at very, very faint objects. We have programming algorithms that we can use, again, came out of the space program, to process our images. Without those programs, we wouldn't have the APODs that we have today. So, as I say, if anybody asks me what was it done for me, well, it's done. This is the first thing it's done for you, is give you this in your pocket, because without the space program, you wouldn't have it.
It's amazing how things have changed. And we were talking about Shoemaker Levy 9, and remember Gene and Carolyn Shoemaker and David Levy, they were still using photographic plates for that. It was probably like just kind of at the end of that era. And now we've got, like you said, the CCD cameras and these amazing detectors for these wide field surveys, and computer programs that can help analyze the images. And it's just amazing how far things have come, and then how we benefit. Like you said, it's in the palm of our hands. You can make these satellites smaller. The DART mission is carrying an Italian CubeSat that's going to watch the impact as it happens. And so, and then going back to what you said earlier, that's a good point. The movies always want to make it look like, the government is hiding something when it comes to an asteroid, or there's only one scientist who knows what's going on and is trying to warn everyone. But you can't hide the sky, and we've got a lot of capable amateur astronomers. And the other thing is the data are all public. The data that are sent to the Minor Planet Center, from the NASA projects and from observers around the world, all of that is public data, and people can, just like ESA and the Center for Near Earth Object Studies at JPL, they pull those data and calculate the orbits and determine if something could pose an impact threat. There's other people out there doing the same thing, amateur orbit calculators, and so I've always said, if there's something that is going to possibly pose an impact threat, it's going to be all over social media before NASA or ESA or anybody even has a chance to say something. But the point is to kind of come out there with the correct information, and so that's why we have also the International Asteroid Warning Network, just to be able to coordinate on that, to be able to have the right information to feed that to the UN and to the member to the governments of the different signatories to the International Asteroid Warning Network. In our case at NASA, we have a policy for notifying up through NASA and to other government agencies, and but it is all going to be public. It's going to be all over the place. And so people are going to have to disentangle all that to look for what is the right, reasonable information. And so that's what we hope to do at NASA, is to at least make sure we get it all together correct and put it out there. but yeah, you can't hide the sky. So
It is worrying, whenever, the fake news, and then you have the big headlines, this asteroid's going to hit, but people become so immune to it. And like we find here, that is why like Asteroid Day, what you do, for education with NASA, ESA, it's important that we all work together, keep going, because someday, if this is a real event, we don't want people sitting back going, oh, but that's in the news all the time. We'll just sit here and be chill about it. So the education and the outreach is something that, definitely needs more, definitely funding and support. So we find, and that, it's very important, and everybody, we've met a lot of people. We have a big community with Asteroid Day and the work that we're involved in as well. And it's just amazing people that are just so passionate, that just want to get, information and share. And so, yeah.
Well, just like what you're doing, I mean, this is a service, that you you go to the trouble to do this, to put this podcast together and to interview people and to be able to reach out to the communities that just, love this kind of information. They love the science and the learning and the awareness. It's a passion, but then it's also in a way a responsibility, because you're seeking the correct information, because there's just so much chaos out there. It's like a mixed blessing we have with all this capability to reach people, and like with all things, they can be used for good or bad. And so it's great to have people out there who are going to the different subject matter experts doing the work and getting the information out there. So that's fabulous.
And the film Don't Look Up, of course, everybody look up.
Right.
It's keep looking up, and I've never met a group of people more in my life than amateur astronomers or professional astronomers that just want to inform each other, tell each other. We all gossip, but we're gossiping about the stars in the sky, not the stars on the telly.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think they're far more exciting, and so
much better.
I was about to say, I preferred the film Meteor, which I think was, oh gosh,
it was like 79, was it?
Yeah, Sean Connery and quite a few other alumni. That was actually, they were using the deflection. They were using nuclear weapons to deflect the asteroid from actually hitting the Earth, which I thought was brilliant, because obviously, having read the book, it was obvious the guy who wrote the book and the screenplay actually got his science together. Mm-hmm. Had actually talked to people who knew what was going on and what was a more realistic approach. Obviously, putting a platform in outer space is illegal under the Outer Space Test Ban Treaty, I think, signed in the 60s. So we can't do it unless it's going to be a major renegotiation in the UN to allow it to happen. But the fact is that we're actually, in some respects, following on, really taking science fiction and making it science fact. Most of us here, as you said earlier, we're into Star Trek, Space 1999. Yeah, I've got my Comlock, and okay, let's do a photo bomb.
I'm still jealous, Nick. I'm so jealous. He has I'm jealous of some of the stuff Nick has. I don't have it.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what really makes me happy is that this little guy is actually being developed for use on the International Space Station.
Wow.
So another thing that scientists have actually brought into reality is Mr. Spock's tricorder. So yeah, we haven't quite got Eagle transporters yet, or shuttlecraft like on the Enterprise or warp drive, or the fusion drive they're using for impulse. We're getting towards impulse drive. We're starting to use ion drives in our space probes, which is allowing us to go further and further out into the solar system and actually be able to do really good work. People forget Voyager really had nuclear snap batteries for its power source. For once it got beyond Jupiter, using the sun for power is not going to happen. So it used a nuclear battery, effectively. There were tons and tons of tests on the actual battery housings. They were dropped from very high altitudes, they were recovered, and they were intact. So the scientists go back and say, well, when we launch the Voyagers, we can guarantee that if there's a launch accident, there will be no radioactive material escaping. But as I say, we are getting to the point where we are doing the things that we often thought was science fiction. We can use an ion drive, we can coast to much higher speeds than using chemical rockets. It means we can have missions like at ESA's Comet Interceptor. New Horizons, as I remember, used ion technology and nuclear power out in the further reaches of the solar system. So we've proved this is technology we've proven. So we know we can get to these asteroids safely. We've got Orion coming on stream, hopefully this year on an unmanned mission, Armistice 1. When we have Orion flying regularly, I know there's often been talk of actually a manned mission to an asteroid. I think that was one of the early objectives of the Orion program, and to go to Mars with it. But it's finally happening. We're getting there. We have the technology now, unbelievably, to do the manned mission and actually put the Mark 1 eyeball. Robots are beautiful. They can go into very hellish environments, like in the Venusian atmosphere, and survive for a short while. They can go into highly radioactive areas like the near space around Jupiter, places humans can't go. On Mars, they're sending us tons and tons of great information about what it's like now and what it might have been like millions of years ago. And as it was proven on one moonwalk, one of the astronauts who had geological training saw a splash of color out of the corner of his eye. He found orange soil. But because he can react instantaneously, the brain allows you to say, hang on, that didn't look right. Time to let's go investigate. We did. We brought it back. And it was probably one of the key moments, I think, of Apollo, finding that soil, because it's changed our views of the regolith completely. So in regards to planetary defense, we are getting eventually the manned capability to actually do something about it. So with DART, with HERA, we are stepping up the space probe part of it. And yeah, I say that it's probably one of the most important things we are doing with our budgets is planetary defense. And it's going to be actually taking the next step, which is to visit some of these objects or even capture them, bring them back to Earth orbit. We're going to need to replace the ISS soon anyway. Hopefully we'll have CIS Lunar Gateway. So we could actually then think about transferring these objects back to the Earth for people to actually look at in the lab, the same way we did with the Apollo moon rocks.
We've done that already with the Ryugu and Bennu. So it's amazing, you know. I think we watched a seminar the other day, the meteorite that landed in the UK, and they were talking about the testing already on Ryugu. So it's incredible, you know, to go far out, bring these samples back, which now is going to, now the current generation, you know, that wants to go into that field of planetary science, that they can still be part of that in years to come with the research. You know, with the planetary defense as well, the saying I love, it's not a case of if, it's a case of when. And planetary defense, you know, it's a massive deal. It's, of course, we're going to be biased. We're passionate about it. But Kelly, you know, at the minute with the DART mission, for the listeners, you know, that we've been following closely, but maybe some that, you know, missed things. Have you an update how the craft is doing, where it is, what updates have we got from the craft?
Right, it's you know, since launch, the team takes it through, you know, tests of the instruments just to make sure everything is is working on there. And so, and I actually don't work directly with DART itself. I kind of handle the other side of the program, like with the telescope assets and the find them part, and then DART is the get them part. But from what I hear from the team, things are going well with testing the instruments and continuing to do the modeling to make sure that everything is working in such a way so that, especially in the area of the autonomous navigation, to be able to image the asteroid pair and then zero in on Dimorphos, the moon of Didymos, and to be able, because it's going to have to navigate on its own into the asteroid and make those fine adjustments at the end. And so even during this cruise, they're continuing to work all that and to test the camera and their star trackers and make sure that everything works in such a way that in all kinds of simulations with now the real data that they have from those instruments, that they can run it through test time and time again, that it hits the asteroid with every simulation.
It's going to be exciting, near the end of September. Well, they have the Draco on board, the navigation, that's going to get everything, the action. But that little cube, Lasea cube, the Italian cube, it's going to be deployed 10 days beforehand. So it's going to get prior the impact and then the ejecta as well of everything. But how excited are you? Like, you have to be excited. I know all the teams have a job to do as well to make sure that this goes, once they reach, that this goes correctly and smoothly and obviously successfully. But I'm sure you guys are not going to sleep when that happens.
Oh, right. And I mean, just first of all, at one point we're all just going to be spectators watching the data come down, hoping that, it hits, because it will be up to the spacecraft. But you're right, it doesn't end there, because it will release Lucia Cube, and that will image the impact and hopefully, ejecta and get some glimpse, and then it's going to speed on by, and because it is a small CubeSat, it will take some time for it to send the data back to Earth. And so it will spend time sending the data back to Earth after the impact happens. But this is also a unique mission where it's a mission that relies on the ground-based observations. And so the mission team has astronomers who will be doing observations with observatories and collaborating with observatories to image the asteroid system over time. And this will take, probably, weeks and months to really do this well, to very carefully measure what that deflection was, since it is just a single spacecraft, other than Lucia Cube imaging the impact. There is no other way to actually assess, what was the deflection. And so that will be done with ground-based telescopes. And so the actual, even though the spacecraft operations will stop, the mission itself will go on, for the rest of the year, or for longer than that. And then, so the team is going to be engaged for a while. And then you mentioned Hera that ESA is building. And so that's what's going to be a fabulous follow-up, is that afterwards, Hera will go and do kind of that scientific study of the Didymos system and look at the crater on Dimorphos, and that extra information will help to refine even more, how did this deflection work out? Because, I mean, if you have like cue ball, pool ball, if you're playing pool and you got pool balls, everything's kind of like perfect, one hits another, and it's just all physics. It all works really well. But when you have a real asteroid with real surface properties and a real shape and everything, how will it react when it gets hit with a spacecraft? And when you have ejecta that's thrown off, how will that kind of give it an extra push? And so DART will get a lot of that information as part of its kind of its core mission, and then Hera will follow up with that additional information. It's a really fabulous era for planetary defense.
We're very excited for that 2024, because we'll be going to the French Guiana for that launch. But it's exciting then, the science bit, that Hera's going to do mapping the asteroid, see what it's made up of, looking at the crater, and to get the measurements. But another thing we discussed about as well, there was a different seminar. One of the team members we were talking about, you know, in the Bennu and the asteroid, they characterized the surface of the asteroid. So there was different names, you know, for the boulders and different, suppose it was an easier way, you know, to have names. So whenever scientists and, you know, we're looking at places, so, oh yeah, that's that bit and that's that bit. But are they going to do the same with Dimorphos and Didymos? You know, are they going to have specific names for that area once they map the surfaces?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know offhand. I assume so. That would be more on the Hera side, I guess, because the DART part is going to be so quick. But that's an interesting thing, because also like the Mars teams tend to do that with the rovers. They name the rocks just so, like you say, so they can keep track of things. But naming of objects and features and such in the solar system, officially naming them, is under the purview of the International Astronomical Union. And so some names are for fun, you know, and for maybe not for fun, but for operations, like you say, for teams to keep track of, and or, you know, there is something sentimental there. Yeah. But for them to be like officially named, that is a process that happens with the International Astronomical Union, and there's certain criteria in place and all that. So I'm sure there will be some of that too, where there, I would think that once there are some prominent features on those bodies, that they would go through that process to officially name them. But I'm sure there's going to be some pet names too.
I think it is exciting, because we found like with Bennu, you know, the OSIRIS-REx mission, you kind of had more of an attachment, because whenever you seen the map and you did tend to take favorite parts of it, and you know, you seem to be, that sounds like someone, but you take an attachment to like a dog or a cat. No, but we took an attachment to a rock on an asteroid. You know, that's just us.
Well, the thing with small bodies too, I mean, like, you know, you'd think like, well, we've been to an asteroid. Why are we sending a mission to another asteroid? You know, like from a science point of view, or a comet. We already saw a comet. Why are we seeing another comet? We seem to find that every time we see a new small body, like it's like they say, we've never seen this before. This is totally new, especially with comets. It's like you know, like with the Rosetta mission and comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko, and I mean, it was so different in shape than, you know, other comets that have been studied, and it's just the small body population is so rich, and there's so much to discover there, and so that's why, you know, you can't just go look at one and say, oh, we're done, because they're all so different. They have their personalities, and they have their roles in the solar system, and the little bits of information they tell us about the history of the solar system. So but then and then when you get to know a particular one, it has its own personality, because it's got its shape and its rocks, those things you recognize.
Yeah.
Has its own. They all have their own charms, just like all the Star Trek different series and the Star Wars different series. We never get bored. They all have their charms, and they all have their place, and we all just want to see more.
Absolutely, they always want to see more. So,
in whatever shape or form, we don't mind.
Oh, I love them.
I remember the fun I say fun now, looking back, when Rosetta was woken up just before the rendezvous with CG-67. I can never say the full name. Terrible. I have problems with Swashman-Wachman 1. I call it SW1. My joke is it's the only comet with a London street address.
Oh.
Actually, it's 73P, which is SW2. So that's two. But I remember all the almost agony waiting for the signals from Rosetta after it woke up to actually be received by Goldstone and relayed to the Mission Control Center, because people were actually concerned it may not have actually woken up at all, and the mission was over. But I think it was probably about a day late finally when we got the signal to say Rosetta's awake, hello, I'm here. And yes, then the star mapping cameras started doing their bit to actually figure out exactly where the space probe was in regards to where the comet's supposed to be. And then we got in, and of course it showed us that our stereotypical idea of comets was, well, out of the window, because it was like a cosmic rubber duck. I just remember the whole fun and games we had with that. There's a rubber duck in the sky. Well, yeah, kind of, but and of course asteroids we're finding now aren't circular, like most people thought they were, they're actually bilobed as well. So and there's also the chance that some of the asteroids we've been looking at are possibly dead comets. But then again, some of them wake up suddenly and they start developing a coma and then a tail. And then it's like, okay, what have we got here? So because I do the Comet Watch show as well, we're beginning to find, well, it's been quiet for quite a long time. Then it just comes in close enough that the crust is cracked. And then it starts to off gas again. And suddenly the mild-mannered asteroid that we've all thought it was isn't an asteroid. It's actually a comet that's just decided to switch itself back on again. And I think that's one of the greatest things, is now we're having to be very careful in how we categorize an object, because it may be currently exhibiting asteroidal tendencies, but it can perhaps come close to be perturbed, coming closer, and then suddenly it's growing a tail. So is it a comet or an asteroid? We just have to wait and see how active it actually gets. And what was thought as being an asteroid then suddenly gets reclassified as a comet, which I think causes the Minor Planets Centre quite a few headaches. And I'm sure Brian Marsden would have loved it, because if it moved and it went bang, he wanted to know about it.
Right. It's not so cut and dried. I mean, yeah, we have asteroids, we have comets, but there are kind of these transitional objects that are dead comets or active asteroids or these transition objects. It just shows that it's but even in the asteroid population, there are many classes, families of asteroids, and they've had different histories. So it's true. It's not always straightforward. And even with the first interstellar object with Oumuamua, it was thought it was an asteroid, but later, as continued to observe it, it exhibited some evidence of some acceleration, indicating it was probably doing some outgassing too.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's not always so clear cut, but you're right. Like you mentioned, Brian Marsden, and with the Minor Planet Center having to, okay, what do we designate it? Oh, now we have to change it. And then what is it? It's just, scientists, we want everything all nice and categorized, and we want the database to be all set so we can go back in history. And it's just, yeah, it's a tough job, but it just shows that we're still learning things about the solar system and about its history.
Margins for error, I think.
And of course, the other great thing is what we thought were solid objects actually appear to be gravitationally bound rubble piles. That's something else we're discovering, because it's always been the classical idea is it's a solid piece of rock that we're observing. Well, when we actually get there, or when we image it better using a combination of different wavelengths, well, it's not a single piece anymore. It's only gravitationally bound together. And to be honest, in some respects, they are probably yes, they will cause a lot of damage if they were to enter the atmosphere, but it wouldn't cause as much damage as, say, the Chicxulub impactor did, which ended one geological time period and then brought in the tertiary one. For ages, I remember the controversy about that, because they weren't, until they could actually analyze the iridium that was found all around the world at this one spot in the geological table, and it was proven not to be a Earth-based isotope of the metal. It was actually slightly different atomically, so that proved that something fairly large impacted from an external source. And now more and more we're finding these impact craters. There's one I think there's a couple in Australia. There's one in Canada that's actually completely underwater. It's in the middle of a lake or something. Barringer crater for a long time was thought to have been volcanic, until Gene Shoemaker got on the case. And in some respect, he's the father really of planetary science. He was a US Geological Survey geologist. His original task was prospecting for uranium, but he was taken into the Apollo program, particularly in regards to the work he was doing with Barringer crater. and he was partly responsible for a lot of the training the astronauts got as scientists. And I think that's one of the best things we have, is that we had the ability to train the astronauts to do proper scientific observations. Okay, we had a bit of fun there at the same time. Alan Shepard and his golf club teeing off on Apollo 14.
Here's a physics experiment, right?
Exactly. I can demonstrate the lunar gravity to you, and the fact there's very little, only an exosphere that's extremely thin. And that's something else people didn't realize about our moon. It has an exosphere. It has a very limited atmosphere. Everybody thought it was a dead, sterile world until then. So yeah, it's one of those really fun things. It's a shame they shut off the experiment packages that were left, because they were giving us very valuable seismological data about the moon. And I think today it's accepted the moon isn't quite as dead as we thought it was. There's still a little bit of action deep in its center, because we still get moonquakes. Now, as to how much of it is due to activity in the core, we don't know. It could be also influenced by the Earth and by the sun. But it's one of those things. This is the type of thing that we have, that without these missions, we would have never known. We would have been stuck looking at it through a telescope, probably until somebody was looking through his telescope and you saw this really small point of light coming straight for him for a eureka moment. But we didn't. We went out there, and because we went out there, we started finding out the space isn't as empty as we thought. Again, that was another misconception. I always said empty vacuum. It's not. It's full of dust and gases and stuff, particularly when the sun decides to have a fit and have a solar flare. But again, it's something that we didn't quite understand until we actually got into space. So again, that's how I sell space exploration, really. Yeah, okay, you've got the nice toys in your pocket. Thank you. You can thank Apollo for that. But you can also thank stuff like radio communications, space satellites for TV. Arthur C. Clarke got them for everybody else, but he wrote the paper that postulated geostationary satellites. Again, it was done really as a science fiction exercise. But it was these people that had the vision, they wrote about it, and they put it in a manner that people could understand it. And now we are going to asteroids, we're going to the outer planets. We're coming around full circle, really. One of the Wright brothers actually lived long enough to see the first man on the moon.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. The visionaries who again wrote the science fiction novels, or who did some of the early experimenting, and with research now, I mean, it needs to be justified, because it's generally taxpayer funded, and there needs to be accountability. It needs to be justified why it's happening, and so there has to be a reason to do it. But sometimes, or often, there's all these other benefits that come out of it you just can't anticipate until you start going down that road. So it's kind of a mix of both. You need to kind of be able to anticipate what's going to come from this. There's got to be a reason to do it. But then once you do it, there's new discoveries, there's new technologies, there's things that you just didn't anticipate at the time. And like you said, there's just so much that have come out of the different activities of the space programs, and just the the visionaries who imagined what could be possible, or what they would love to see possible, led to like you were holding in your hands there, a tricorder, and it's not just they're not just props anymore. So.
Oh, exactly. And of course, the great thing is sometimes it's that science fiction, the desire to say, hey, I saw this great idea in a movie. Let's see if we can make it work for real. It would be brilliant. We had the Scion organizers for a long time. They were great. You could plug units into them that held programs and stuff that you could do stuff on. But they weren't really as more expandable. Now we're talking, the language is about, well, you know what? We can make this idea from science fiction work in reality, and we can make it a very useful scientific tool as well. So it's really full circle. Gene Roddenberry visualized it. He got it through the networks. He sold it as a wagon train to the stars.
Yeah.
And ironically, the flip phones, this looks like just like a Nokia flip phone to me. And I've seen flip phones that look like it.
Also tablets. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the tablets. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have had them because all the research that the European Space Agency, that NASA uses, that JAXA uses, they are providing with that into the real world as the proof of this is why you're getting value for your dollar, yen, pound, whatever, because you're getting all the spin-offs, Teflon frying pans, space program. People just don't think, you're so used to it, you cook with it every day, you don't think where it came from.
No.
Even our beds we sleep in as well. The mattresses have been tested by NASA. It's everything. Space is everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. What do you think now is the inspiration like for the younger generation? I don't feel that old, but I am, because I've encountered people like who are like doing internships at NASA, and they've never seen the original Star Trek. And I'm like, how can that be? But you know what? That was a long time ago. We were kids then, and that just inspired us.
Yeah.
But and things are so like you said, it's led to it kind of foreshadowed some of the technologies and things that we would see today, holding communication devices in the palms of our hands and everything. What do you think the inspiration is now for this generation? Is it a particular show like that, or is it just what's happening in like in the space program, or is it just the influence of here we are in the COVID culture? Or what do you think is the inspiration now?
I think a lot of it is perhaps people like me who remember the original Star Trek, that remember Jerry Anderson doing things like UFO and Space 1999. He did Space Precinct.
1999.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And it's kind of ironic that one of the first things that Musk came out with is, I want to build Moon Base Alpha. And that's what he called it. And there's a whole bunch of us going, oh, great. And we were all messaging Jamie Anderson, who's Jerry's son. Did you just see what Elon Musk said? No, he says, watch it, rewind it, watch it. And he goes, Dad would have been happy. But yeah, as I say, there are the TV land channels. They show these shows. They even show Time Tunnel again every now and again. But I think in some respects, they still have a grip. Yeah, we got Star Wars, we got the last 3 films and everything. But I think people want the ability to jump in at the Millennium Falcon and really go somewhere.
Yeah. You're right. They see it on the screen, but now they want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about trying to figure out how to safely have a fusion-driven spacecraft. We're even re-examining things like Project Daedalus, which was a controlled nuclear explosion to bootstrap a Bussard ramjet to near light speed to go to the next star. Yeah, it's only 4.2 light years away. No, it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Not so much, but we're starting to look at the technologies we needed and think, well, can we do that?
But I think
NASA had a program called NERVA. It was to build a suitable nuclear engine to go into the far reaches of the solar system, hopefully on a manned basis. That's now being dragged out of the archives, and people are you can find it all on the internet just by doing a search. The information's all there. The British Planetary Society for years has wanted to build a Bussard ramjet. In fact, there was one story, this was back in the back end of the Second World War, when the V2 started coming in, that 2 members of the British Interplanetary Society were in a pub having a pint, and one of these new rockets came in and fell, and it didn't go off, but there was this proper rocket. It wasn't a powered glider. This was a rocket, like we've been writing about the science fiction for years. It stood on its tail, it went up, took a ballistic path and came down. And they were apparently dancing in the street, much to the worriment of the air raid wardens. But this is the type of thing that the modern generation have in the form of The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, stuff like that. They're coming up watching Disney Channel. They're seeing the Marvel movies. They're seeing space travel portrayed, and they're thinking, I want to do that. And then they start talking to people like me who grew up on Star Trek, etc. And I said, well, we've been thinking about this, but we need people like you to become physicists and engineers to build it.
Yeah. But I think the big inspiration for now is the astronauts, you know, the crewed missions, the women, the men, and the story that they're sharing through their eyes from the International Space Station. There's big diversity and inclusion now with all the industries, because many you know, children, I can't do that because, you know, I have a disability, or I can't be like that because I don't see somebody that looks like me. But now, because there's so much diversity and inclusion and the education out there, like I have a little boy, he's 12 now, but he was completely autistic, non-verbal, until Tim Peake launched to space. That's when Hayden first said his first words. And I always knew then there was something, you know, when he looked at the night sky, there was a big connection, but he couldn't communicate it. And then from, you know, learning, it's not just astronauts, you know, there's so many cool jobs that you can do within the space industry. You know, there's art, there's the science, there's the media, there's the, you know, technology, the computer programming. But I think now it is amazing that we have, you know, up to the launch, you have the release of who the new class of astronauts are. Everybody's captivated. You'll always connect with one, or maybe them all, but usually you'll find, you know, maybe a kid of color looks now at astronauts and go, God, she's like me, or he's like me. So I think the story that they tell now, of course, obviously, you know, with Star Trek and Star Wars, you know, the older generation of me growing up, when I first seen the Mir space station crossing over the skies, you know, obviously the night sky as well. But now I think that is a big part of it, you know, the way the communications of stories and the way the astronauts tell it from their eyes. That is a big inspiration now, that and as I say again, with the diversity and inclusion, which is really celebrated now. You know, everybody has a place in space. So nobody now, you know, should never feel that I can't be that. You can be anything you want to be. I think it's fantastic how things have shifted, and really celebrating all abilities. You know, there's no barriers. So look at ESA now, they're having the power of, they're going to have the part of the space program people can apply with disabilities. So it's the first time that they're actually going to do this. You know, when it first came out, people go, can this be done? Of course, you're in microgravity, you know, you're floating, you're not going to need, you know. And it was just so inspiring when the other astronauts saying, you know, a disability, we don't look at it like this, everybody has an ability. So that for me is big inspiration, the way stories are told and captivating everybody.
Also, I think space nowadays is an actual reality. It's not something that we read in a book in a library, which I would have done in the 80s. The only thing I could see was go to the library, look at a book and send it back, and it was the same book I'd look at all the time. Now it's 24/7, it's everywhere, it's accessible, and everyone now, I think, feels like they can definitely be a part. Am I
Sorry,
gone?
no, you're still here. You are locked up a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's just saying about space. I think, yeah, as Caroline was saying, it's very inclusive. But there's more of it, and there's more of us, and I think it's including everyone, and we can all access it literally by going out our door and looking up.
Well, we've actually been on this podcast for well over 1.5 hours.
But this was fun.
Well, I decided to change
Time
my background.
flies.
Just give you a better background to look at. So I think that's one thing I'm looking for.
Sure.
That's one thing I'm looking forward to, is finally getting a space station like we had in 2001. That would be awesome.
That would be.
Ladies, any more questions?
Kelly, just we were touching there. You asked us the question about what inspires, but what advice would you have for any boy or girl, that's not already involved in STEM and STEAM? I love that part, the arts as well. But what advice would you have for people going into, especially like a career like yourself in planetary defense?
Well, like you said, they can do it. It's really open to anybody who wants to. It's because certainly a lot of the barriers that you spoke of are down now, and though it also takes initiative, because like with many like academic type careers, it's sometimes it involves proposing for funding to cover the research you want to do and everything. So you have to really want to do it. But if you want to, the doors are wide open, because it's so encouraged now, STEM careers. There's so many agencies and institutions and universities that are promoting it and trying to create pathways for people to get into that, for kids to get into STEM, especially if they don't have maybe the resources to do it, but to open those doors. But also at the same time, I think that STEM careers shouldn't be promoted so much that people feel like if they're not going to be a scientist, they don't need to learn science, because it's still just something that everybody can enjoy. In many cases, their taxpayer funds are going toward funding science. And so it's good that they understand where their taxpayer funds are going, but they can just still be a part of it. And so, so people shouldn't feel like they have to be planning to go into a STEM career just to be able to take some STEM classes, or to enjoy things like this podcast or other ways just to be a part of the things that are happening, like space missions, like planetary defense. And so so people should still take science classes, and we should make science fun and communicate it well anyway, whether or not somebody's going to go into STEM careers. But the nice thing is there is more support for that, for a wide variety of people to make their way into STEM careers. And sometimes it's STEM supporting. Just a real quick story. I was at a conference once, and I was speaking to some undergraduates that came from the nearby university. And this one young lady said, I always wanted to work for NASA, but I wasn't good at math. And I said, well, what are you studying? She said, pre-law. And first of all, I don't think I could be a good lawyer. And I'm like, you know what? NASA doesn't just have scientists and engineers. We'd be in big trouble if that's all we had. Yeah. We've got lawyers, we've got budget people, we've got policy people, we've got administrative people. You can also be a part of STEM without actually being, in a STEM job, because none of these space agencies or companies or universities, none of them function without all of these other pieces. Yeah. And so it is possible to be a part of STEM, even if you are not a scientist or engineer. So there are many ways to participate.
But I love the way as well, the DART mission, the way they interacted and brought everybody. They had the campaign, Planetary Defender campaign, which you got a certificate, and you've submitted your little video, I'm a planetary defender. But it was just magical. You just see the connection around the world, that the excitement that it fired up, and it really helped you open the eyes and ears of many young people that oh, this is cool. This is a really cool area that I want to know more about. And there was a big uptake on that. So that was brilliant as well.
It opened my eyes too, because it's funny, if you saw the video that the Planetary Defense Officer Lindley Johnson did promoting that, and I was there when he was filming it. I was helping to hold up the script, and so it was just fun seeing that put together. But I didn't see it. I didn't see the responses until right at the DART launch. I was helping with the launch.
My little boy was on that video.
Was he? Oh, I'll have to go back and look, because I was going to say I saw kids on there. And so
he's wearing his the Hera mission shirt.
So I will go back and look, because I didn't see it for the first time until like we were prepping for the launch broadcast, and I first of all I see Patrick Michelle, who's on the Hera mission. He's there saying, "I'm a planetary defender." I thought that was so funny, but then I saw the kids on there, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, look!" And then a variety of people. But I'm going to go back and look for your son. That's so amazing. I'm so glad.
Well, like you were saying, on the support side, my father worked for the European Space Agency as a contractor. He was running the Olympus satellite. Basically, they were taking the feed from Euromir, and for Euromir, basically they were translating it into the American TV standard, into the UK standard, and the European standard. So you've got 3 different TV standards, and you're trying to send out all the same signal at the same time, and you've got a whole complex array of standards to play with. So I actually got across to STEC whilst Olympus was still running, and it was one of those the actual antenna that we were using for it was based on a lorry trailer. So it was sitting there, it could track the satellite literally across the sky, and everything was really being done from a small desk. It wasn't a huge mission control room or anything. It was literally 3 people or 2 people. One guy was actually dealing with the actual TV feeds. My dad was keeping the actual links, the uplink and downlinks, all up and going. So it was, there are plenty of jobs if people can't or don't want to be astronauts or be in the science divisions. There's all those lovely support areas where you can take your discipline and you can really put everything into it. So you could be great for doing voiceovers, for doing PA, doing public videos and stuff. Or you can be...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say, none of these things happen in a vacuum, and it all takes a whole support infrastructure, and that all happens with people. And so that's why all the scientists and engineers who they need to really have I think a humility, realizing that they wouldn't get to do what they're doing if they didn't have the support of the rest of the institution and all the people who are involved.
Well, we've been up nearly 1 hour 45 minutes, and I think we all that's quite a record, I think, for the show. I think
you can do some editing, I'm sure.
Oh no editing. What will happen is I'll take the video and I'll strip the audio out, because the audio will get played on astronomy.fm, so which reaches all around the world. So it'll get played for every 4 hours so it'll be played possibly on a Wednesday night. Then on the Thursday, every 4 hours, the show will go out. And Anglo-Irish Astro Geeks and Comet Watch are the only shows that they do where we're allowed to overrun.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, because the Comet Watch, we actually got over to 2.5 hours of solid show. We had David Levy, Rick Hill, Rich Kowalski, Jim Scotty, Alan Hale on, and it was like one of those, this is going to be an all-nighter.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Absolutely. Get the coffee ready.
Then on June on the show, we'll be doing an Asteroid Day special with Danica and one of her panel. So that'll be good.
Well, Kelly, would you like, if we can, would you like to come back for the Asteroid Day special and join Danica and us for that?
I have another obligation for Asteroid Day, but thanks for asking, though.
Well, as I say,
feel free to follow up an email. We'll see. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. I know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah. You got my address. Well,
But,
thank you so much for having me. Though this was really a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate all you're doing. This is it's just been so neat, and Caroline, to get to see your son there briefly, that was
Yeah,
that's
it
fabulous.
brought me down this before you go. This is scrapped from Ice Age Collision Course. So there's a whole story behind that. He did a vlog on Asteroid Day. So that's how the planetary defense community discovered him, talking about naughty scrap, that he was putting Earth at risk. And so I better mention that, or I'll be getting into trouble.
Oh dear. Anyway, we'd love to have you come back at some point again, Kelly, because as I say, we've 1.5, 1 3/4 hours already. I think we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll be my pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So lovely to virtually meet you, Kelly.
Yeah.
You're amazing to talk to, and your job, absolutely inspiring.
No, thank
So
you. And yours too. I hope we can meet in
think-
person one of these days.
Back in the real world, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be maybe there'll be an Asteroid Day get together somewhere that we can all attend.
Hmm.
Anyway, I think it's probably the best thing to know is for all of us to say good night here, because it's 9:45 at night in the universal time zone. So it's good night from me.
Good night from me.
And a very good night from me. Thank you.
And thank you.